Están las tres. Chao, Emanuele. Hola. Buenas
Hi,
tardes.
hi to everyone.
Vale, hay cacharritos de traducción simultánea. Si alguien prefiere escucharla, ya tenéis. Vale. Bueno, muchas gracias a nuestras traductoras que están también en el Zoom apoyando y que están también tramadas en todas estas redes, y otros días estarán no en la traducción, sino también aquí en la conversación. Bueno, bienvenidos a la segunda parte de este primer encuentro de investigación militante con el Institute of Radical Imagination con nosotras. No voy a hacerlo como tan extenso, pero sí quería, como se han incorporado las compañeras de tejidos conjuntivos, a las que saludamos, hacer un pequeño resumen. A ver, perdona, que tengo aquí. Bueno, hemos arrancado este nodo de investigaciones militantes que nos acompañaba Jorge antes, bueno, dando un marco, ¿no?, de por qué este nodo en el marco de tejidos. Jorge ha contado de dónde surge tejidos, ¿no?, este proceso todavía experimental, ¿no?, y tentativo de construir este tejido de investigación con todas vosotras y todos vosotros. Y porque cuando se empieza a convocar este tejido de investigación, pues iniciamos una serie de conversaciones, las compañeras de Museo en Red con el Centro de Estudios, para introducir otra serie de prácticas de investigación militantes que no vienen de la academia o que no emergen de los espacios institucionales, sino que emergen de otro tipo de prácticas. Y puesto que Museo en Red llevábamos más de 10 años también creando un tejido, nosotras lo formulamos más en términos de trama, como una especie de entramado en la que el museo se enreda, participa, es parte, ¿no?, y es atravesado por toda una serie de agentes, de personas, de colectivas, de espacios sociales, de las ciudades, del territorio que nos circunda como lavapiés, pero también entendiéndolo dentro de un marco situado en el espacio, en el tiempo, ¿no?, no solo en lo local, sino también en la ciudad, en la región, en el estado y en el mundo, ¿no? Y entonces decidimos convocar a 3 de las redes con las que colaboramos: la Laboratoria Espacios de Investigación Feminista, la Fundación de los Comunes y el Instituto de Imaginación Radical. No voy a describirlo ahora porque mis compañeras aquí lo van a hacer en esta segunda sesión, ya que hemos cambiado el orden. Y bueno, sin más, lo que convocaba a este modo tenía que ver con esos otros modos de producción de conocimiento, que muchas veces están ligados también con la práctica, con las prácticas, con los modos de organizar lo posible de los que nos dotamos, ¿no?, desde los activismos, como decía, desde los espacios sociales, pero también desde las prácticas artísticas. Entonces, mis compañeras del IRI hoy en esta segunda sesión van a compartir 2 de los procesos en los que el IRI ha estado inmerso en los últimos años: el Art for UBI y Art for Radical Ecologies. Y bueno, tenemos ahora con nosotras aquí en la mesa y en la mesa virtual también, a Marco Baravalle, que es artista, comisario y miembro de Sale Docs en Venecia, un espacio colectivo e independiente para las artes visuales, el activismo y el teatro experimental. Actualmente, además, es becario de investigación en el proyecto In Common de la Universidad de Venecia, y bueno, ya sigue con nuevos proyectos de investigación que igual nos cuenta. Sus campos de investigación incluyen la relación entre el arte, el teatro y el activismo, el trabajo creativo, la gentrificación y el posicionamiento del arte dentro de la economía neoliberal. Y a su lado le acompaña Gabriella Riccio, que es artista, coreógrafa, comisaria, activista e investigadora. Activa el movimiento por los comunes y activa en el movimiento por los comunes y el movimiento italiano de espacios culturales autónomos. Es miembro del asilo Filangieri en Nápoles, donde su trabajo abarca los comunes culturales y la democracia participativa, y ha publicado ensayos sobre la relación entre danza y filosofía, así como sobre la intersección de la ética, la estética y la política. Y por último, online, pero igualmente presente con nosotras hoy, Emanuele Braga, que es artista, investigador y activista y cofundador del Centro Social Macao en Milán, de la compañía de danza y teatro Balletto Civile, el proyecto de arte contemporáneo RACE, así como Landscape Choreography, una plataforma de arte que cuestiona el papel del cuerpo bajo el capitalismo. Su investigación se centra en modelos de producción cultural, procesos de transformación social, economía política, derechos laborales y la institución de los bienes comunes. Y con esto tenemos al completo los nodos italianos del IRI, de esta red del sur de Europa. Bueno, los nodos sí, ¿no? Los nodos. ¿Pero de nodos? Ah, claro, pero me refería a Nápoles, Venecia, Milán, como 3 nodos importantes de la red. Así que muchas gracias por estar con nosotras hoy y os doy ya la palabra.
Gracias a Sara. Thanks to the translators and online, and thank you for coming to this meeting. Just a couple of words to say something about the Institute of Radical Imagination. As we said before, we came together, a little genealogy of the Institute. Like, we came together having already crossed paths in the years before among some of us in 2017. And with this idea of creating a shared space between artists, activists, but also academics, curators, and cultural operators, for the Institute to be a joint between cultural institutions in the formal world and the world of activism. And precisely before we heard about the stories of Zeino and Dimitri, which represent 2 territories in Istanbul precisely, and St. Petersburg, and now in exile in Germany with Wisto. So the shape of the Institute is this collective of individuals, each one thinking and deeply connected with its own territory to create a joint also with the activist group in the territories. And the Institute operates through nodes. Precisely now we are moving to another area, which is more Italian based. And it operates through the idea of platforms as dispositive of activations. So those platforms, as we heard before, can be more in the shades because of the time needs more protection and less exposure, or need more intimacy and direct dialogue, like the experience of the School of Emergency that was telling us about Dimitri, but can also have wider open action in the world. We today are here, myself, as a little genealogy of how we came into contact, is because, once again, after the crisis of 2008, and a few days ago, I had the chance to visit the Capítulo 8, the exhibition that has just finished in Reina Sofia, telling the story of the financial crisis in Europe and how it affected the cultural world and the world as it is. So with the occupations from the States moving to Europe, the Arab Spring, and in this moment of 2008, all those occupations of the squares or occupations of cultural spaces in Italy were also creating connections and bonds. In this moment of time, I was in Naples and jumping in the experience of ex asilo Filangieri, and we already acted as a network with Sale Dogs in Venice and with Macau, where Emanuele is based in Milan. Maddalena will speak tomorrow also from Milan and Macau experience. And we were in network with comrades that were in Greece, as well as Spain. So strong connections were already there, and that's also how this dialogue with Museo en Red and the people who inhabit the museum and started this dialogue, this open dialogue. So at the time, one of the reasons for the struggles in Italy was, of course, that the crisis was hitting hard on the cultural world. So as artists, and we found ourselves deeply affected. And so there was a claim for already back then a universal basic income to defend workers' rights. But beside this, say, claim and protest, we decided to occupy spaces to really keep hold of public spaces, reclaiming them as commons, and spaces where we started to experience ways of being together and activating together and organized together otherwise. So we started find ourselves in assemblies, in circles, with a new methodology, a new human technology of being and sharing and producing together, pulling together not only spaces and resources, but also knowledges and relationships. So this is the experience we come from. And in the Institute, to approach the topics of what we are presenting today, those two other platforms, one on Art for UBI, and where UBI stands for Universal and Unconditional Basic Income, and Art for Radical Ecologies. During the pandemic, as the Institute, we found ourselves gathering in the little squares of the Zoom platform. And at the time, there was this big problem of government defining what activities are considered to be essential or non-essential, and once again hitting hard on culture and questioning the role of culture in society in and of itself. So we decided to call for a platform, and Emanuele will go deeper into that, to start questioning ourselves and come together to understand what would it be the role of art and art workers facing the health crisis and claiming for social justice. And in the years, this platform has been activating not only assemblies, but also came out with manifesto, campaign, publication, and a performance as a dispositive of inquiry in territories, and to be a dispositive of a catalyst of bringing together, reactivating activism around the topics. Sorry. So after 2 years, this platform is still going on. And we of course decided, we had the urge, given the climate crisis, to activate, following more or less the same pattern, another platform, this time asking for a positioning of the art world and our artists, art workers, towards the issues of radical ecologies and climate justice. If we go to the idea of how we can read this as militant research, we see that the Institute not only takes place into a space of enunciation and in the world of the sensitive and of the on the sensitive of the sensitive with artistic actions and formats and practices, but also in the element of subjectivation, of self-organization. So this also is activated in the case of those two platforms to the co-writing of manifestos, and which are in and of itself a radical way of producing a different knowledge situated in the conditions of the territories and the people that inhabit the experiences. And a third element, of course, is that of the self-education and radical pedagogy, which is also the space those platforms create for sharing experiences and learning from each other, creating manifestos, going with campaigns, and bringing performative formats that can bring the dialogue into the public space. So that is all for me, and I pass the word to Emanuele, because we start with the Art for UBI platform, and then we follow up.
Hi to everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. So good evening, and thank you for this organization. Art for UBI Manifesto, it's a platform that was born in 2020, in the very middle of the pandemic, and is still lasting, is still ongoing. So basically has been a process in between the pandemic crisis and the actual moment in which we have a totally different situation, facing like the war and a big economical and energetic crisis in Europe and in the place in we are based. Probably is also significant that this issue of how we can face the sustainability of our lives in between these two crises is a very central topic. In Italy, in between these two moments, we have also a fascist government nowadays, and I mean, the repression that we had during this very critical moment is increasing. I was listening before to Zeno and Dimitri point of view, and also, I mean, being based in Italy, I have to say that if in the pandemia we felt the central position of the social fabric, the importance of being in solidarity in between each others, and with a lot of production of mutual aid and care, with many groups. I mean, basically in Italy as well as in Greece, in Spain, and also in the other countries around the Mediterranean zone, activating care practices in that very particular moment. And the reaction afterwards has been, I mean, an even worse repression in front of the skyrocketing of the housing prices, the inflation, the crisis of the labor market, and even more racialization of the migrants as a labor market. So I mean, we are facing a very difficult moment, and that's why also for us this laboratory, this assembly, this platform discussing social justice and unconditional and universal basic income as like the unique answer that we can claim for was very useful and activated also a lot of discussion in different territories. What we did basically a 1-year process in the very beginning, discussing with different collectives internationally about what the art sector could claim for the social justice. And in that period, there was only the possibility to stay online because it was 2020, and under the framework in Institute of Radical Imagination of this project called School of Mutation, we had many meetings with collectives based in Italy, in Spain, in Belgium, in UK, in US, in Germany, that were collectives already active on how to distribute wealth, how to fight for a basic income measure, how to start up self-organized mutual aid structures, enabling like the possibility to distribute wealth as a basic income. With these collectives, we started to discuss what could be like a manifesto from the art sector in order to claim a basic income. First of all, I have to say, in these discussions, was very, very important to state as artists a measure for the entire society, because we come from in the arts like an environment or a discourse in which the art production is felt as a sort of luxury done by the middle and upper class for middle and upper class, mainly white, and a lot of also struggles that we did for the artist right consider the art workers as a sort of a corporation or like a sector that is defending itself. And so the first move in this platform has been to really like break down the wall and clearly state that as artists we are claiming for a revolution and a measure for the entire society. Also because the precarization of the creative and artist sectors has been like a laboratory in order to change all the labor market. And so for us was very important to start from the art sector in order to go beyond our category and also beyond the concept of labor. And afterwards, we went in the discussion that was already quite clear from our fighting process that claiming for a basic income means to give to everyone the possibility to say no to the shitty jobs. So in a lot of actors in these assemblies, there was this feeling that in the labor market so precarious in which we operate, in a way the commitment for work is a sort of is a sort of I mean kidnap. We cannot say no, and we cannot say no for our own sustainability, and we cannot say no to shitty condition of contracts, and we cannot say no to a very low wage. We cannot say no also to a production line in which we don't believe, that we don't want to reproduce. And so the second part of the manifesto, I think, is really like strong in developing this way to say no. This was very linked also from the contribution of the collectives inside the assemblies coming from the transfeminism, because the tradition of feminism and transfeminism put in the very center this strategic role to say no and to say and to be able to not reproduce something that is exploiting and is not taking care of what we want to produce. In a certain moment, we started also to discuss about where to take the wealth, to take back the wealth that is not redistributed by the welfare system and by the labor market. And so the manifesto has a point on a critique to, for example, the digital labor and the platform of the capital. And so how the financial system and the digital platform, all these new dispositives that are concentrating a lot of wealth and not redistributing in the society, and through the tool of the debt is also cutting and destroying the capability of the states in order to promote welfare measures. In the very end of this process was also central that probably the basic income concept is also something that could free up our way of thinking and to produce and to reproduce in order to being able to foster an ecological view. of our production. And so for me, has been also very, very useful to discuss in the end of this process of co-writing how the social justice and the climate justice are very, very linked. And so after we launched the manifesto in 2021, has been a surprise and also very useful for the process that on the ground in different territories, starting from the collectives that were contributing to this process, also in the streets and in different cities, we did actions promoting this issue. For example, in Milan, we had an occupation of one of the main important theater, a temporary occupation of the Piccolo Theater, and in Rome, Campo Innocente, that was part of our platform, participated to the occupation, temporary occupation of the Globe Theater in Rome. Also in Brussels, we had different occupation of theaters and spaces. And in the assemblies of this action, this issue of the basic income, the claim and the fight for a basic income, the discussion starting from this manifesto was there. Also because, as I said before, in the very end of, in the queue of the pandemic crisis, everyone was waiting for more welfare. Also because the care and the mutual aid, this capability of the social fabric to reproduce an alternative, not the normality that we said was the problem, was so central. In the 2021 and 2022, we decided to transform, because landing on the ground, apart from the discussion online, was so useful. We decided to transform this process in a militant research in different territories. Anna Rispoli, that is an artist based in Brussels, part of the UBI, the Art for UBI platform from the very beginning, proposed to the Teatre Woche in Vienna to do a performance, an inquiry and a performance collaborating with us in Vienna, questioning the issue of social justice, income, labor market, housing, sustainability to the people. Deciding to involve a very different spectrum of participants, so from old to young, from precarious workers to more like people retired, to students, to migrants, and we found this methodology very interesting, and we decided to replicate this performance, inquiry, discussion on the ground, also in Madrid 6 months later, and afterwards in Milan, in Italy, and nowadays we are replicating the same militant research within the art and cultural workers in the Biennale of Venice. What we discovered, we discovered that more or less there is a red thread in between all these different territories, but also that each one is slightly different, is situated in a specific condition. For example, in Madrid was very present. We found a very strong mutual aid infrastructure and culture. A very lively, like informal relationship that was really like empowering the social fabric. A very we involved persons, for example, from Territorio Domestico that took in a perspective on how to self-organize the care labor and the domestic labor, and then also Renta Básica movement from Spain and the collective La Murga cooperative from Barcelona that was also part of the co-writing process of the manifesto, gave us the touch on the local fighting for the basic income. In Milan, for example, it was 1 year later. So I think the energetic and economical crisis close to the war was already there, was even more present, the crisis, the economical crisis. And Milano, we found a city very violent in terms of competition. They spoke about the problem of housing, because here in Milano the housing cost is very unbearable comparing to the condition of labor and the distribution of wealth. They spoke also about this very particular feeling to being forced to pretend to be more rich than you are in order to be competitive in the labor market. And so also this psychological stress to have no money, to have a very high cost for housing, and be always pretending and stressed, performative, in order to show up you better than you are. And then we engaged also, for example, a person from the health system and the domestic labor and the logistics, for example, riders or drivers, and we discovered that here in Milano and in Italy in general, probably this is a category really without any rights, mainly migrants, so with a very strong and violent racialization, in which in a lot of cases they have to stay 10 years working with maybe 3-4 euro per hour, with no contracts, dreaming for in a day a contract. And now we are working on Venice. What
Emanuele,
to say more? Yeah.
Si quieres ir cerrando para pasar a Marco,
Yeah.
para luego tener tiempo para charlar con las compañeras que están aquí también, ¿te parece? O si quieres cerrar en un
No,
minutito. Un minuto.
I passed the floor to
Vale.
Marco because he was supposed to speak about Venice.
Muchas gracias, Emanuele.
And just to say that we are following also the questions on the chat. So knowing what's the question about, I'm going to let Marco, because it's connected to what he's going to tell us, and we'll reply.
Hello, how are you? How you doing? Doing
Knacker.
good. A bit late, but still here. Okay, fine. So Venice, as Emanuele was introducing, the idea of Venice is to apply the methodology of Art for UBI, the performance, to a specific problem. The inquiry on the cultural labor, which is based in the city of Venice. Practically, how did we proceed and how are we proceeding? Because the performance is going to be on the 19th of May. So we're almost there in like 1 month or something like that. The occasion was given to us by the German pavilion of the next Architecture Biennale, which is a lot focused on the issue of labor and on the issue of maintenance. And so we suggested that the performance of Art for UBI could be a sort of I would say, a good addition to the program of the pavilion. How did we proceed concretely? We basically chose, I would say, 11 or 12 cultural and art workers based in Venice in a way that we try to form a group as different as possible. So we do have kind of a wide spectrum of people that we chose, from, let's say, what we see as the problematic or bad guy in the performance, which is an entrepreneur which works in the production of events in Venice, which valorizes on the financial market historical building, which rents spaces in Venice, for example, pavilions of the Venice Biennale, and which produces this kind of events. Up to very different works, up to, for example, a migrant woman from Eastern Europe, which works as a janitor in the public museums in Venice. And then, you know, this in between, in the middle of the specters, you have very, very different figures and characters of the typical precarious cultural labor. So you have many people that works within the Biennale ecosystem, because of course the Biennale, I would say, is the main event, the main art and cultural event in Venice. You might know about the film festival, you might know about the art biennial, but Biennale has different sectors. We do have architecture biennial, there's the music biennial, the dance biennial, and of course this forms a huge ecosystem of cultural labor in Venice. So for example, we interviewed cultural mediators, we interviewed museum guards, we interviewed people that work in pavilions, we interviewed performers, we interviewed artists, so people that are like directly involved in creative tasks. So and out of this 12, I would say quite detailed interviewed, we wrote a dramaturgy. We are now in the process really these days of finalizing the dramaturgy. Then this dramaturgy will be performed by the same people, by the actual workers in a public space in Venice on the 19th of May. Some of the performers will be the actual people that we interviewed, but because of the sensitive informations that these people gave us, some of the performers will not be the original interviewed, but will be actual performers, will be avatars, basically, that of course will substitute the original people, because some of them were afraid of retaliations, were afraid of losing their jobs or losing the possibility to be called again for the jobs. So of course the goal is that of denouncing the precarization and sometimes exploitation conditions which are very, very common in the art economy of Venice. But at the same time, it is not really, this performative research is not really something that we would like to limit to sociology. It's not a way to apply performance to sociology. We do have, when we think of this performative militant research, we do have a specific historic precedent, which is not a fetish, is not something that we want to copy as it was made in the past, but it's a point of departure, and it's something that clarifies, I would say, our posture as artists and as activists that want something different than simply feeding the machine of the Biennale with some engaged art. But to go back to the historic precedent I'm mentioning is the Italian operaista con ricerca. This is the Italian word that in English can be translated as co-research, con ricerca, which was, let's say, knowledge production and political method, which was invented by the Italian operaisti in the 60s. The Italian operaisti were a group of communist, I would say, heterodox intellectuals and militants, which decided to abandon, let's say, the traditional and ideological way even the workers' movement back then was producing its knowledge, by somehow not reading the classical text of socialism as a Bible and then ideologically apply these teachings to reality, but exactly the opposite way, to go directly to do field research, and field research specifically in the factories, which in the 60s were the main, I would say, the main place of rebellion and the main place of subjectivity formation. So the idea was not to produce knowledge from outside the social dimension or above the social dimension, but thinking of yourself as someone who is involved in the social fabric and who is participating with, already participated in social struggles and social conflicts. To make a long story short, the idea was that co-research had one goal, which was not simply the production of knowledge, but the production of subjectivity, which is a completely different thing. The idea was to think of the theoretical moment, of the research moment, not as something separated from activism, but as one element of activism, as one part of political organization. So the idea is not that we study something from outside and maybe we also study with this supposedly neutral positioning, because of course we know now that knowledge is never neutral, is always already embedded within power structures, but it's to let's say, to understand knowledge in a partisan way. We produce knowledge for our part. Back then it was the proletariat. And this is the only way through which we can actually know society. And at the same time, we can produce political action, not as a separated moment, but as a moment which is intimately connected to knowledge production. Of course, the point is not to, again, to think that we still are in the 60s and to have nostalgia about the good old days of the workers' movement, not at all. But I mean, when we think of situated research, we situate ourselves not in a neutral space, and not even in a space of in a purely aesthetic space, which is often the risk that artists run, to see themselves as people who belong to a separated space, to see themselves as mediators of society when society doesn't at all need artist mediation, let's say. We situate ourselves in a context. We situate ourselves from the or within the part of the workers against the neoliberal, I would say, or against the neoliberal art economy, and we try somehow to use the performance to make or take some steps forward, not only in the process of producing knowledge about precarization, but in the process of acting within precarization. Again, from theory to practice.
So I'm here to your right, Marco. Yeah. It's me. I'm just trying to keep hold a little bit of time, because we have some questions, and precisely.
Let me just finish.
Talking. Precisely talking about the Venice process, if you also want to share the images we have of the of the posters that we have. Celina is the one, yes, just to show how this process of inquiry and interview becomes real action and campaigning. No, it's the other one, Celina. Okay. Oh no, this is.
No, I think
the images, Celina, the flames, the PDFs.
Yeah. Sorry, and I can move a bit so you can see the screen.
Maybe you can, yeah. And then, no, not that one. Yes, exactly. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we prepared too much material for the presentation.
No, but I mean, I can really close it in 3 minutes and then leave the floor to you, Gabby, if you want to add something or to questions. How did we try this step from this simple production of knowledge to an attempt, at least, of producing subjectivity, mobilization, self-organization? The idea is that the performance will end with a call to the people that are there, to cultural workers of the city, to gather again after 2 weeks at Sale Docks, which is this self-managed / occupied art space I'm part of, in order to actually start a process of self-organization, a process of discussion about, like common struggles, common solutions, and so on and so forth. So again, the performance, which will happen as a sort of performative assembly, is not the final end of the process, is one step in I would say, in a larger process. The idea is to launch this performance through a web and actual posters campaign, in which we gathered some of the claims that came out of the interviews. So the title of the performance is going to be Biennalocene, of course, a bit of an ironical title. And you can see here a few of the claims. So 10 euros per hour minimal wage for cultural workers, because in Italy it does not exist a minimum wage at all, not to mention cultural workers. And many or a few of the people we interviewed, people which are graduated, which are educated, that speak, I don't know, a few foreign languages, for example, have wages or incomes of less than 4, 5, or 4 euros per hour, even if they are employed by very, very rich cultural institutions. But there are many other claims that came out. So yeah, that's all.
Yes, this links to this question. I don't know, maybe we can just then wrap up on Radical Ecologies as the new platform that we are launching. But this exactly claim links to this question that we have in the chat, which says, do you know anybody of the environment around IRI that really has applied this discourse to say no in their work practice, and really basing his claim in the manifesto? And in some moments, en algún momento the shitty proposal, okay, yeah, when they will receive the shit proposal, or a posteriori when they received or denied the proposal, has created a practical case and within the framework of the manifesto. So precisely to this question, I would reply that, for example, the manifesto is in and of itself really an act of radical imagination, because first of all, we thought about my manifesto addressing the global, planetary, and beyond world, that in Italy, for example, we do not have a minimum wage, and we do not have a basic income, not even half of it. Like recently, the government is canceling exactly what we call the reddito di cittadinanza, the citizen income, that's been a measure for bridging during the pandemic. But we do have examples of these people. We interviewed in Venice. There's this amazing cultural worker, young woman, 2 doctorate theses and a lot of expertise, who, when she found out that to be a cultural mediator, in the end, through tricks on their contract, she was being paid much less than promised and expected. Because this happened to a group of mediators, they were all witnessing the same conditions. The non-Italian were put in the contract as having no title at all, even if they had. So they decided to say no to the job, and they created a group that is called Cultural Mediator. I don't remember exactly the name, but they did create a group to address the unions and to get support against this this contract for all workers. So we do have experiences where it is possible to say no. Of course, in Italy, you must be in conditions to say no, because there is no parachute for Italians, no income.
But also, like another younger, probably still a student, when we presented the book in Venice, she came to us and told us that by reading the book, she started to say no to some unpaid internships, for example. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a small example. Of course, it takes much more than a manifesto or a book or a performance to solve this huge problem. But I mean, we did have some witnesses of you know, or we witnessed some people that were actually, I don't know, pushed to act after meeting R for UBI, for example.
Can I add a comment?
Yes, yeah, sure, of course.
No, last but not least, in many situations, we discovered that it's possible to say no if you have a strong mutual aid infrastructure in your where you live. For example, from Brussels, this common wallet project that is like a way to commonize all the incomes in between a group of people in Madrid as well, in Milan, also hosting or opening your apartment as a shelter is a way to save a little bit of money from mutual aid. And being able to say no to the second or third shitty jobs otherwise you have to do, Also in Macau and in Milano, we did for several years a self-organized basic income within the organization in order to provide a basic income for the activists to free up time. I mean, it's not solving your sustainability, but is a way to being able to say no to the very shitty situations.
Thank you, Emanuele.
Muchas gracias a las tres. Me voy a quitar.
And yes, and just to close this part, we materialized this experience and knowledge around the Art for UBI manifesto in the first publication of the Institute with 5 different contributions, and including the manifesto itself, the text of the performance, Una Renta Mucho Mundos, that we realized here within the framework of the Zapatista Forum in the museum. And yes, so it will be available also here in the
Si queréis, igual
Reina Sofia
podemos circular alguno para que lo vean si
yes,
quieren.
and I would really open the floor to comments
Sí.
and questions and listen to you all.
Sí, bueno, muchas gracias a las tres y además porque han surgido, ¿no? Hemos ido y venido entre prácticas militantes, prácticas artísticas, con esa historia también que nos remite, ¿no?, al operaísmo italiano en los 60 y a ciertas prácticas de investigación militante que se desarrollaron ahí. En esta suerte de declinación posible, ¿no? El mundo del arte que está tan fuertemente marcado por la figura del artista, por la figura del curador, como ese ser como, ¿no?, que trabaja heroicamente de medio en solitario. Esta posibilidad de trabajar desde lo colectivo convocando dispositivos que provocan subjetivación, pero que provocan organización también. Cuando hicisteis la performance aquí en el museo, que convocamos a mucha gente de Madrid que no trabaja con el arte, que no había participado en una performance, que no se sentía al principio cómoda en ese formato, fue súper productivo, ¿no? Como que abrió la mirada y el cuerpo a la posibilidad de la performance como dispositivo. Y nada, solamente quería agradeceros y pensar, ¿no?, en esa posibilidad de cuando el arte se constituye como sujeto colectivo, no el artista, y convoca a la sociedad a través de una pregunta como la renta básica universal, ¿no? ¿Puede el mundo del arte seguir funcionando de esa manera o tiene que cumplir ese rol de transformación social? Y aquí tenemos también investigadoras, artistas, compañeras, varias, así que si le apetece a alguien no contribuir o comentar alguna de las líneas que se han compartido esta tarde.
Lo que no me queda claro es si, me voy a quitar esto, perdón, si la renta, el instituto, bueno, la campaña de renta básica de Venecia, por ejemplo, es dentro del mundo del arte o es con otros colectivos, es lo que no me ha quedado claro.
Dentro del mundo del arte.
Si solamente es una cosa que se suscribe al mundo del arte, a trabajadores, a los 11 trabajadores culturales de la Bienal.
Sí.
Entiendo que en Venecia pues todo el mundo trabaja en el Bienal, bueno, todo el mundo,
Sí.
mucha gente trabaja en la Bienal del Cine, la Bienal de Arte, la Bienal de Arquitectura, la Bienal de Música, ¿no?
Claro.
Pero si solamente es del mundo del arte y solamente está la duda, y después yo, la experiencia que tengo con la renta básica en Sevilla es que, bueno, pues somos de diferentes, no somos del mundo del arte, somos de muchos sitios. Y lo que aportamos cada uno es lo que sabemos. Por ejemplo, un amigo cantador flamenco pues, me pide que le haga canciones. Entonces nosotros hacemos canciones. Pero las performances cantadas flamencos son en manifestaciones, no son en museos, ni en galerías, ni en espacios artísticos, ¿entiendes? Son en los sitios de activación en la calle. Pregunto si es así.
Sí, ¿puedo contestar yo? Cuando hemos empezado con el implante del manifiesto online, en la idea del manifiesto, lo pensábamos como una herramienta global, como algo para enlazar hacia adelante y que incluía como un posicionamiento del mundo del arte pidiendo una renta básica universal para todo el mundo, y para todas y para todos, incluyendo todas las fases sociales y cualquier forma de empleo, trabajo, actividad. Entonces, es así que hemos ensayado también estas entrevistas en Viena y en Madrid y en Milano, incluyendo diferentes personas que eran representativas de diferentes expresiones de la sociedad. Esta fase que estamos presentando en Venecia, justo porque hemos decidido enfocarla solo y únicamente cuestionando una parte del trabajo, que es lo del trabajo cultural y del entorno de la cultura, de la industria cultural que está en torno al sistema bienal de Venecia y que impacta mucho también con las rentas, con los hogares, con condiciones de la sociedad, pero sí que en este grupo que ¿cómo se dice? La investigación la estamos haciendo con un enfoque realmente sobre la cultura, pero en el grupo no solo tenemos artistas, sino tenemos también personas que se ocupan de guardar las salas de los museos o de limpiar los museos. Así que otra vez tenemos diferentes personas representativas de diferentes posiciones hacia la cultura, también los técnicos, hacia el mundo de lo que representa la Bienale en sí misma y el entorno de la cultura alrededor de la Bienale.
Creo que la pregunta iba también a si se activan estos dispositivos fuera del marco institucional, en la calle también, yo qué sé, porque como hemos hablado de la del museo, yo creo
Pues
que...
sí, esto lo había ya contado Emanuele, que durante la pandemia sí que hemos utilizado el manifiesto, ha sido una herramienta en las calles, en las plazas, que en este momento la plaza simbólicamente era este teatro ocupado temporalmente, el Globe Theatre, pero ha sido en la calle en Venecia con otros grupos de activistas que han realmente utilizado el manifiesto como claim, como llamada para la renta básica universal. No sé si he contestado todo.
Buenas, bueno, lo primero, muchas gracias por vuestra exposición. Yo quería preguntaros qué tipo de sujeto político, es decir, estáis utilizando el medio artístico para no solo como una disposición expresiva, sino como un dispositivo para generar subjetividad y por lo tanto para generar una especie de sujeto. Y os pregunto cuál sería la nomenclatura de ese sujeto, porque con vuestra exposición estabas recordando, bueno, yo viví en Italia y en el año 2015 hubo la exposición de Milán, se hizo una anti-expo y sacaron una campaña que tengo la imagen en la cabeza, pero no me acuerdo muy bien del nombre, pero que ellos exponían el concepto de precario y bueno, hicieron una campaña en esta expo que era además como muy queer en Milán y el tema que se puso en la discusión en todo en el mundo social o espacios sociales era: tenemos que construir el sujeto político del precariado, ¿no? Del precario. Entonces, ahora, en estos tiempos donde hay una disolución, por así decirlo, de la comunidad, ¿no? Y una subjetividad muy individual, muy marcada, especialmente quizás en los sujetos que se dedican al mundo artístico, ¿no? Estas expresiones de freelance, etcétera. ¿Qué tipo de subjetividad pensáis, qué tipo de sujeto político colectivo es el que puede disparar vuestra propuesta? Muchas gracias.
I think this is the...
Y Emanuele también después, si quieres hablar, te activas la cámara y puedes después hablar también. Go, Marcos.
waiting for the... I think yours is the $1,000,000 question. So who is the political subject is really the question. And I don't think we do have a final answer today. What I can say from my perspective is that, you know, when we think of the precariato, of the precarios, we think a bit of a cycle which is not ended, but is a bit slowing down, you know, was not, it is not anymore the first 10 years of 2000s with the big Euro May days in Milano, where like social movements were actually able to mobilize thousands and thousands of precarious workers. I think that going back to militant research is exactly because we need to find new names, new subjects, new subjectivities that can somehow interpret, you know, like a drive towards change. Now, it is also true that our I would say our scope in Venice is somehow limited because we are thinking of a very situated context, of a very specific context. What I can tell is definitely that in Venice, cultural workers need to answer the fragmentation to which the system has pushed them. You know, they need to start again from talking to each other beyond their, you know, micro identities, beyond the fact that you are working with I don't know, you are a guide, you are an artist, you are a janitor. But the first thing would be to open a space where people can recognize the thing that they have in common, be their problems or solutions or way to act and to recognize themselves.
Tenemos otra intervención aquí. Espera, Emanuele, si quieres recogemos esta última y después te paso a ti por si acaso también quieres contestar a esta, ¿vale?
Yeah, I have understood that you have said that the performance is going to be the next 19 in May, but you had said that this is only to be the first step of a long process. So how can you ensure that people is coming back to participate again in the second appointment, or I don't know? And the other question is, how can we imagine that subjectivity could be performed or could be shaped in one only action, or it is needed more extended process, I think.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. That's why we think of the performance as a step, not as, you know, as a solution. By the way, the performance is already part of a longer process, which is Art for UBI, all the process that Emma described, and it is a process that is now like 3 years old. So it is already inscribed within a process. And how to make sure people will come back, we don't know, but we have to work in order to. But yeah, we're working on it, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we also try to place those processes in territories where we also have bonds and connections. So second step, also Sale Docs, which remains in Venice. So the performance will happen as a little fire starting symbolically, because people have been involved with interviews also in the previous months, and we are trying to keep for this group expanding, already calling for assemblies at Sale Docs, to have that as a reference point and headquarters to create further assemblies and keep the group going. Of course, it's always, you know, a process, but of course this is to say we don't conceive the performance aesthetically, but we do want to take care of processes as long as we can and forces join.
Tenemos que cerrar en 2 minutos, un minuto y medio, y Emanuele también quería comentar algo. Sí.
Emma, I will leave you the word immediately. On the other end, I think that we do not have to underestimate also the performance as a performance, because sometimes in a performative assembly, things happen that won't happen in an actual assembly, I would say. So somehow also, we also bet on the power of the performance in order, I don't know, to spark some possible, I would say, or in order to, to spark some possible ways of prefiguration of, so, I mean, the fact that it's a performance is not simply a tool to go somewhere else. It has its own, of course, its own power, its own meaning.
Emanuele, 10 segundos. Es que tenemos que
Just to
cerrar.
react to both the intervention, I'm from all this history in Milan from the 2000, working on the precariat and with the Euromay Day and then No Expo, and then commenting all the situation of fragmented subjectivities as a precarious class and so on. I hope nowadays that in Italy, because this fascist government is cutting this byproduct of basic income that we have, but they are cutting also that one, that maybe we are able to react like in France. They started to react to the cut to the pension system and to claim for a basic income, for a universal basic income with such a mobilization. Also, like unifying the front with the eco-activism as in France, for example. I think it would be the season now.
Gracias, Emma. Muchísimas gracias, Emanuele, Gabriela, Marco, por vuestras intervenciones. Mañana seguimos a las 11 en la Puerta de Tabacalera. Nos encontramos a las 6 aquí en la sala de protocolo. Muchísimas gracias.
Bueno, vamos comenzando con esta segunda parte del día, de este nodo de investigaciones militantes. Vamos a comenzar ahora con Marco Baravalle, que nos va a comentar un poco más sobre Art for Radical Ecologies, estas plataformas artísticas que el IRI despliega en distintos lugares como modo de organización y desde la práctica artística. Marco es artista, comisario y miembro de Sale Docs en Venecia, un espacio colectivo e independiente para las artes visuales, el activismo y el teatro experimental, y actualmente además es becario de investigación en el proyecto In Common de la Universidad UBI di Venecia. Mi italiano es muy malo. Sus campos de investigación incluyen la relación entre arte, teatro y activismo, el trabajo creativo, la gentrificación y el posicionamiento del arte dentro de la economía neoliberal. Y es también parte del Instituto of Radical Imagination.
So Art for Radical Ecology began in the first half of 2022, and we were looking for a way to commit IRI to the struggle for climate justice. And we took the inspiration from the other IRI's project that we presented yesterday, Art for UBI. So the first idea was to come together, not only the people and the activists of IRI, but to call other people from the art world, art workers, in order to start a collective process of writing, a process of writing which would lead to a manifesto for radical ecology. So the topic would be how art workers position themselves in the struggle for climate justice. The manifesto, to which I will come back later, is still in the process of being written. So differently from Art for UBI manifesto, which we wrote, in this case, we are like in process, let's say. And as usual, when it comes to IRI, our idea is to stay on a double level. That is the level of reflection, but also on the level of action. And like an occasion to act was given to us by the 2022 Venice Climate Camp, a climate camp that was organized at Lido of Venice in September of last year. It was organized by local climate activists together with the Committee Against Big Cruise Ships of Venice during the film festival of La Biennale. So, you know, like the activists of last generation now target, you know, works of art or symbolic buildings. our idea in Venice was to target the global event of the film festival in order to exploit, let's say, some of its visibility, of the visibility of the event. So after a few online assemblies, we basically, again, artists, activists, scholars, in which we started to reflect on how on what topics should Art for Radical Ecology Manifesto include. We decided to go to Venice, and we met in Venice, and we were part of the program of the Venice Climate Camp. I don't know if we can show some pictures, or you can see here, for example, the 4 activities that we did. We did we did a general assembly with all the people who came there in order to continue to proceed on the work of the manifesto. We did a screening of films by Oliver Ressler, who's an Austrian artist and filmmaker who dedicated, let's say, who devoted many films to document actions of climate activists all over Europe, I would say, in the last 10 years. Then Paolo Cirio is an Italian artist, gave a workshop on the role of big oil multinational companies in aggravating, let's say, the global warming. And then maybe we can go to the picture of Super Symbionte, which was a performance by an Italian artist whose name is Andreco. And Andreco usually takes inspiration from the format of the demonstration and performs some choreographic demonstrations in performing art festivals all over Italy and all over Europe. What we said this time was we asked Andreco to have his performance inside the actual climate march that was organized by the climate activists at Lido. So the result was, and also Maria and Sara from the museum were there. Maybe you see them in some of the pictures. So the result was that within this demonstration, there was our part of the demonstration, which was somehow a performative part of the demo itself. You can see here, Andreco designed a few flags, and all the flags have portrayed the Venetian lagoon on it. So they have the image of the lagoon of Venice, and the banner is a banner with no writings. It carries no sign, but the banner instead was used as a sort of performative object. Also, the other interesting thing is that none of these performers, or at least I would say 1 out of, I don't know, 15 performers, is a professional performance. All the other performers were people who came to the climate camp, and Andreco prepared the performance with them during the 3 days of the climate camp. So this is like a small example of how, as IRI, we almost always prefer to embed our art contribution within actual moments of mobilizations. You know, we are, of course, art workers, so we occupy the institutional space of art, but at the same time, it's crucial to us to always be in touch and be embedded somehow in actual social dynamics, in social movements, or in experimenting in contexts such as the Venice Climate Camp. We will have a follow-up next year, this time at Sale Docs. That is the collective and autonomous art space I'm part of in Venice. And we are preparing an event which is titled A Gathering into the Maelstrom. I can't tell you that much about, I don't have many anticipations about the program, but the idea is again to have a strict collaboration, not only with Sale Docs, which is already like a social movement space, but also with the Committee Against the Big Cruise Ships of Venice, and maybe the possibility to, I don't know, we are thinking about an island which is in front of the new harbor where the big cruise ships dock in Venice. So this is a bit of an anticipation, and it will happen, I think, at the end of April, again in parallel with the opening of the next Art Biennale. So to close this very brief presentation of Art for Radical Ecologies so far, I mean, where is the discussion, where is the reflection taking us so far? Okay, the challenge when we think of writing a manifesto on climate justice is not being banal. It's not simply repeating what everybody else is already repeating concerning climate justice, that basically the art system should degrow, which is of course not a banal thing. Everybody's saying it, but only a few situations are actually committing to a serious degrowth of the art system, let's say. But what we are thinking as art workers and activists is that ideally it would be of extreme importance to break a binarism between two different theoretical, I would say, lines of thinking that often are working separate, in a very separate way. So on one side, there are the so-called new materialism. So basically all that philosophical discourse pretty much intertwined with feminism that includes thinkers such as Rosi Braidotti or Karen Barad, to a certain extent Donna Haraway, that is basically highlighting the issue of the vitality of matter and the issue of the agency of non-human matter. We have this on one side, and we see to what extent this is fashionable in the art world. Everywhere we see exhibitions in which the agency of non-human things, or the theory of humus by Donna Haraway, or this type of theoretical discourse and related imagery is mobilized a lot. But what we see many times within the artwork is that this type of discourse is aestheticized, is depoliticized, or is somehow diffused. It becomes, the point is, let's hear the leaves talking, and then you forget all the human agency and all the responsibility, and particularly the responsibility of capitalism and extractivism in causing the current ecological crisis. On the other hand, there is another line of thinking, which personally I feel closer to myself, which is more related to the so-called political ecology, which is closer to, which comes from Marxism, and which includes thinkers such as Andreas Malm or Jason W. Moore, for example. That is all about underlining the responsibility of extractivism in accelerating global warming, and the fact that the roots of global warming are roots that are really somehow that are really planted within the capitalist original accumulation period, and then evolving and becoming more serious with time. The point is that these two lines of thinking quite often, or almost always, work separately, work in a separate way. What we think art can do is to, let's say, in a very banal way, I would say, take the best out of these two lines of thinking and make them work together, creating an assemblage between the importance of avoiding or abandoning anthropocentrism and the importance of acknowledging the vitality of matter, but at the same time framing this discourse within a critique of current extractivism of capitalism. And as people that deal with art on a daily basis, we know how art can be a very effective tool in this endeavor, I would say. So this is just, and I'm closing. I still have 2 minutes, but I'm closing just to say that, Gabri, I'm closing, don't worry. And yes, so stay tuned for more art for Radical Ecology. And yeah, if you will come to Venice next year, we're gonna have fun together.